What's up guys, YST here and welcome back to another Raid Shadow Legends video, and today I am joined by my HH Gaming teammate, Mr. Saf. How's it going, bro?
Not too bad, thanks. How are you doing? How are you coping with the gnooting, as we like to call it, the gnut fusion?
The new fusion's going pretty well. It would be better if my daughter didn't smack me across the head with a toy, and that's left me a big mark in my head. So like,
Well, I mean, maybe
The
she's
good
trying to knock
life.
some sense into you, right? That's
Yeah,
what I always
she's
say.
trying. But yeah, how's your fusion going? All that good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, the main's going okay. The free-to-play is, it's all about the champion chase and the next artifact enhancement, right? I mean, artifact enhancements are horrific, but hey, that's not what we're here to talk about. That's just a side part. He is relevant to what we're going to talk about today, isn't he? But
Yep.
yeah, it's going well.
Yeah.
Just tiring.
So basically, what we're going to be doing today, guys, is apart from this defeat, which could definitely happen 100%, is basically speak about our favorite champions to take on the Shadow, what's his name? The Phantom Shogun's Grove, the new Shadowkin warrior that I seem to be spending. I think I spent around 40 to 50 hours over the past week trying to come up with the best strategies. Oh, now I know why we failed. We went on to stage 25. Let's go to stage 24.
Yeah, you have been blasting this boss. Like I did it a little bit on live stream. We kind of like just, I don't know, threw some champions together and iterated up to I think about stage 20. But then I started hitting the crazy accuracy wall, right? The crazy number of acts you need. And my rehost in my clan boss team. So turns out 205 accuracy ain't gonna cut it. So yeah, we've got to rebuild the whole clan boss team to go any higher. But you have been blasting it for hours.
Yeah. So what kind of team was you kind of thinking of? So once you get your hands on Gnut, is there a specific team you've got in mind, or are you going to go for resets or non-resets? How are you going to try and tackle this?
Yeah, so like obviously we're testing it and talking about it and showing off, and pretty much like I did the video right before we even got any sort of access to the boss, no test server, and I kind of knew straight off the bat. I was like, right, well, you don't really, you just want to make sure you control Enfeeble. As long as the shade counter doesn't go up, they've built his entire mechanics around shade counter, right? So as long as you can control like weak hitting, then it should be good. So we naturally navigated towards a reset Enfeeble target and then straight into like, okay, well, he hasn't got any sort of damage reduction actives other than the passive, like 10% max HP. So to be honest, we can just one-shot him, right? I mean, that's kind of like the concept. So I'm probably looking to run on my 25 team because I'm fortunate enough to have a Riho, not a Krizia. I'm not fortunate to have Krizia. Riho, who I think is probably the best champion in the game for both Sand Devil and this Shogun Grove, right? Apart from like a Neri comps, like Riho is almost like quintessential required because of the volume of debuffs in one single attack. Then I think here, like Riho with a Renegade reset because I don't have a Kaimar, and then I'm actually going to go very suspicious duo with alongside Gnut. I'm not going to say because it's going to be a video and I don't want to leak any secrets, but I'm going to have a very special duo that nobody's even going to think about. Oh, well, maybe if you watch my streams, you probably know, but hey, yeah, that's kind of like the Gnut. I think is going to be like the one champion you want for this encounter, right?
Yes,
I think he's going to be the boss.
Yeah, I don't know why I was failing there. I was like, I'm pretty sure that I've not lost in this team, and then now I just seen like some bad RNGs. I had to quickly build this team for the intro. But basically, for anybody that doesn't understand the fundamentals of this boss, just to briefly break it down, you're going to require an Enfeeble tank, which is basically the champion that's going to have the highest crit damage. In this particular occasion, is going to be my Wither the Crowned, who is one of my favorite champions for this boss. Also, there's going to be block passive skills, so those champions that reap that benefit, you're not going to be able to use those unless you've got Stone Skin for that initial phase. You're also going to need some blessings on your team in order to reduce the shade counter, which is this tedious thing up here at the top. And of course, you can do a debuff spread effect, taking that Enfeeble onto everybody. So if you don't have any cleansers in your composition, you're basically going to be doing weak hits. That shade counter is going to go to the roof, and that's it. Your team goes to the bin.
GG. There are some nuances there we need to talk about. Like, so I think a lot of people have been confused in terms of how the stone skin works, because obviously the original test server was a bit gimmicky. It's a bit like, oh, I've got a stone skin, the game's over. Like, it was too easy. So they've changed it now. A lot of people don't realize that stone skin is going to get avoided. Some people have been like saying, I've got the highest crit damage on my stone skin champion. Why is it not getting attacked? It won't attack a Stone Skin champion unless the entire team is in Stone Skin. Once the entire team is in Stone Skin, then it will target the champion who has the highest amount of crit damage of all the Stone Skin champions. But it basically means you can't have your enfeeble target in Stone Skin and then get it to be targeted and not take any damage, right? You can't do that. You'd have to have everyone in Stone Skin. And the other thing to note is when he does debuff spread, you can't resist the debuff spread, but what he spreads is not protected. So you can cleanse what he spreads, you just can't stop him spreading it. So some of those are the nuances that we've discovered since actually playtesting a bit more and playing and realizing that Stone Skin was way too strong originally.
Yeah, so what is there anything from this boss that you're not actually a big fan of? Like for me personally, I don't like the way that you can increase the shade counters by crazy amounts on somebody that has multiple hits such as Cold Heart to like take it up to 30 straight away. But then if you've got then if you want to reduce it using blessings, you can only do it per skill. And that's one thing that I'm not a big fan of. Is there anything that like that for you? Or?
I think it's a bit dodgy for me that essentially your Cold Heart A1 is going to reduce or is going to increase the counter by every single attack. But then if she isn't enfeebled, she doesn't reduce the counter by every single attack, right? So I think that's a little bit dodgy for me, in the sense that personally, I would say I would prefer it to be per attack consistently. Like I always advocate for consistency. So if you're going to make it that the shade counter increases per attack, then the shade counter should also reduce per attack. Or the shade counter needs to increase per skill so that it matches what your reduction is. Because otherwise, it's like the price of bringing a 4-hit A1 isn't worth the reward of bringing a 4-hit A1, right? So if I've got like a 5-star Awakened champion, it's not like that Awakening is benefiting me more than, oh, whoops, he's got enfeebled. Now the counter, it's basically 8 times 4. So you basically kill yourself if Cold Heart takes A1 with a weak hit. So it's just it almost makes Cold Heart to some extent less valuable here. It's too risky if you can't control the enfeeble. You have to be very, very confident that they're never going to get enfeeble and they're never going to weak hit, because the moment they do it once on stage 25, it's lights out. Because the moment that shade counter gets above 20, you are in trouble. Doesn't matter how many awakenings you've got, you will probably get knocked right back down. And once he starts killing one of your champions, that's my experience anyway. Once the enfeeble tank dies, your team hasn't got long left. It's got like maybe 1 or 2 turns max.
Yeah, 100%. There's definitely been in that situation. It's like, what's going on here? You die. If literally one of your champions, like my Withered Crown, is dead, basically it's finished. Or if you get like that 3% resisted or your second tank, like there's one thing that I've noticed as well is we can actually catch it in this run before we go into the options, that once the block passive skills finish, although that I've got the highest crit damage champion, he still A1s my Ruella, which I still haven't found it, like here right there. You see that there? Like, even though with a positive affinity, we haven't got Enfeeble on, and he should be prioritizing the champion under Enfeeble, he's still, like, picking and choosing a separate target without the highest crit damage.
Probably kill ability, because the only thing that prioritizes highest crit damage is that Forest of Spears, which is the A3, the opening ability. That's the only one that actually has any sort of specific targeting. So it's probably, he's looking at the way the clan boss does it, right? He look at the clan boss and look at it and go, okay, well, that's the most killable champion, so I'm going to go kill that champion, right? It's probably what it's doing. So to some extent, that's the value of having a slow and feeble target, in the sense that there's 2 ways you can really do it. And we've written this up in the guide on the website, which came out yesterday, right? We've got a guide on hellhades.com that kind of covers all of the different things. It's got all the boss skills, it's got all the different recommended teams, and it's got a pretty in-depth strategy. And there is a way... The way that you manage the enfeeble target is almost critical to the way that you manage your team. You either go like a slow reset kind of route, where you basically just want the champion to take one action that doesn't attack the boss to reset your champions, and you kill it, and then you kind of kill it before your enfeeble target dies. Or you can kind of go like a faster enfeeble target, but like a cleanse healer, like the Width of the Crown. So it basically means that you can run the enfeeble target. The only risk with you have with that is in this video where you're seeing Wither is outrunning the enfeeble, it's going faster than the boss can reapply the enfeeble, so then the boss has a free attack on a random champion. Whereas in the slow version, he'll only ever attack anyone with enfeeble, so you can kind of control who takes damage more. The other option then obviously is taunt, but I don't think this one is much viable, because like if you don't have the right taunt champion, it's quite difficult to do. But the idea is you basically take the initial enfeeble, then you taunt the boss, and then the boss can't actually spread the enfeeble, so you don't need the cleanser. So in essence, the taunt stops the boss from being able to do his second skill, which spreads the enfeeble from that initial target. The only issue is obviously there's like, 3 taunt champions in the game?
Yeah. Is that new
So
leveling dude? Is it Green Warden and then Duodan?
Green Warden, Ruark,
Yeah.
and Duerdan. And Duerdan's only a 1 turn, so you're kind of like very limited. Ruark, you could probably run a very slow Ruark, right? You could probably almost like make the concept of a slow and feeble target a slow taunt target. So you basically take Ruark, you sit him there at like, I don't know, 150 speed. He puts the taunt up after the boss takes his first turn. The boss gets taunted. Now the boss has to permanently attack Ruark until Ruark takes 2 turns, which is never going to happen, right? So there is a viability in having Ruark as a taunt, but I think, like we've been talking about it, most players are probably going to have a debuff cleanser than they are going to have a taunt. It's like just the way that it's likely to run. So you're more likely going to find it easier to build a cleanser than a taunt champion, at least until we get another 4 to 5 taunt champions in the game.
Yeah, 100%. All right, guys, we're going to head over to the index now. Let's break down our favorite champions. Let's get right into it. All right, then. So do you want to kick us off here with your first champion that you value the most when we speak about the Shogun's growth?
So I think this champion is going to be in every single person's team, and you probably know where I'm going with it straight away. It's Gnut.
Oh, yes,
Gnut.
of course.
Gnut is going to be the number one. He is, when you get him, the single greatest enemy. Right to say it. When you get Gnut, he will be the hardest hitting single ability champion against high-end content in the game. He hits at A3 3 times, 10% max HP. He's going to take 30% of any boss's max HP in one ability. Yes, Acrizia can outdamage him over a long run, but in a small space example, Gnut just basically is the highest damaging ability in the game. So I think most people will probably wait for their Shogun Grove until they get Gnut, and they'll build a team around him. It just makes sense, right? You basically hit him once, reset, hit him once. You only need 40% more to kill off the boss. It's pretty strong.
Yeah, it is nuts. Like, even there was one person in my Discord who actually summoned the Gnut, and he's going for the Gnut fusion, so he's gonna have like double Gnut. I'm like, damn, yeah, you're living the good life.
Nut.
Yeah, I just realized he's got the Fire Knight shield on his skin here. I like that.
Yeah, the new skin looks really cool, right? He's got the Fire Knight shield on there, and he's
living the good life.
As I said, I'll always say this: the art department of Playroom is probably the best in mobile gaming. They're so good.
Yeah, I think what it is, I think they made the skin because loads of people were saying they wasn't a fan of this, like, this isn't a legendary skin, and then they're like,
I kind of like it though. I kind of like the Gnut base skin. I mean, his axe is very glowy. Okay, is it a basic? Yeah, sure, but I mean, it's a dwarf, right? I mean,
he reminds me of Gimli, Lord of the Rings.
I'm really curious to see what his story is with Samar Gemcurse, right? In the Call of the Arbiter, we saw Samar show up.
Oh, is it? I can't remember that. Oh, okay.
Yeah, Samar's his brother.
Ooh.
I think. I don't even know if there's lore in the game for it, but I'm pretty sure in the Call of the Arbiter. Yeah, there you go. See, it's there you go. He's the youngest son of what's his name? If you got to the top
Mountain
there,
King.
The youngest son of Mountain King. Yeah, he's
that's
that's
curious. Crazy. Okay.
I'd love to know what the story is behind that. I probably should read the lore, but yeah, Mountain King's obviously the king.
Interesting. Okay, that'd be cool if they unraveled
his
that.
son, right? I mean, if you should really read the lore, everyone. I mean, if you're interested in knowing more about the character, the lore is quite good. I'm
do you know
quite
what
bad in not reading it.
For me, because they've not added Genzen yet, right? I just refuse. I'm like, how dare they? That's
champion is shrouded in mystery.
Yeah.
They are adding loads. The last update they added about 10 more. So to be fair, they're growing it out pretty well.
Sure. All right. Leading into my first champion, it's going to be one that we just showcased in that run as well, and it's going to be Wither the Crown. Now, the reason why I love Wither as well is, for me on my main account, I don't have value for her elsewhere. I've got champions such as Duchess and just other really good healers or support champions. And this actually gives mine a use, in a sense. I can build her for this one particular thing, put her in Affinity Breaker so she doesn't get weak hits, occasionally anyway. And she also only has one attacking ability, so we're not increasing that shade counter. And once we start to pair that with the increased defense, to help out Gnut a bit with damage as well, we've got this as well for the full out cleanse and the heal of herself, being that enfeeble tank. She's just a phenomenal champion to bring into the mix, and she's the right affinity as well to bring in for stage 25 with those weak hits. So I'm a huge fan of her. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, that's the big thing, that your enfeeble target, you don't want them attacking, because as much as you can quite quickly get rid of some shade counter, you don't even need crazy awakening, right? A lot of people seem to think, if I don't have souls, I can't do it. Like 1 or 2 stars is normally enough.
Yeah.
But if you have a lot of attacks going off on your weak target, then you are going to quickly raise that shade counter to a point where you can't really do anything. So having an enfeeble tank like Wither here with low attack count is actually very important. You can't have a
Yeah.
lots of attacks or lots of hits on your enfeeble target.
Yeah, so actually coming off that as well, do you know for players that's trying to step into this for the first ever time and they're getting very intimidated by the blessings, right? Because it is a thing that they kind of advertise. We definitely do need it to keep that down. What would you say is like a safe place for players? Like for me, I keep saying that if you can have 4 champions with maybe 1 to 2 stars or 3 champions with 3 stars, usually is enough to get keep it under control. What would you say?
I don't even think you need that many. I think 1-star blessings on a couple of champions is absolutely fine. If you've controlled your enfeeble target well, like with her there, she's going to attack once every like 3 turns. So as long as she's not going like 500 speed, you're going to increase it by 2 when you cleanse, and you're also going to get increased by weak hits, and you're also going to get increased when the boss critically hits. So the boss only really single targets, so you've only got 1 risk of an increase of 5. As long as you are bringing neutral or strong affinity or void champions as your other champions, you're not going to weak hit there. As long as you're cleansing away that extra enfeeble. So at best, you're going to maybe hit like 13 counter, which means that you know if you've got 4 of the champions attacking, well, if they're 1-star, you're going to get that back down below 10, and then they attack again. So I don't really think you need crazy amounts of awakening, like 1 to 2 stars. Basically, what you would normally get out of a tier 1 stone is probably going to be enough for a lot of players.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of the game mode here, like you read a lot of the passives and a lot of the text in this boss, it sounds awfully complicated. It's really quite simple.
Yeah.
Control the enfeeble, do some damage, don't bring multi-hitters unless you know you can like stop the enfeeble, and you should be okay for at least to stage 7, right?
Yeah, because
If
I
you pick
believe
up
that
that nasty quest. So
it's 30 shade counters. As long as you stay below that, you kind of mitigate the reduction of max HP, right? So as long as you
I
can
would
stay
say
below
20.
That, yeah.
The reason why I would say 20 is because he does gain critical hit and critical damage percentages from the stack. So he gains like 1% crit rate for every single shade counter. So he starts typically, like if you're doing high end, he starts at 50%. If you're doing sort of lower end, he starts around about 35%. So you don't really want to go above 20 because then you're talking like he's above 50% crit rate most of the time if you're not bringing decreased crit rate as a debuff.
Yeah.
So
I look at him.
It's not just the effects you got to keep in mind. It's those little extra stat bonuses that can just overwhelm your enfeeble target.
Yeah, I kind of resonated with the Griffin in a sense where you don't want him to reach the highest sky bonds because once he gets there, you're basically dead, right? So trying to stay as low as possible is impactful.
It's exactly the same concept. The boss has been programmed around his shade counter. So if you let his shade counter get out of control, he's going to do a lot of damage. Actually, if you don't, he doesn't really hit that hard. He has like 35,000 attack, but he doesn't actually hit. It doesn't feel like he hits as hard as the stats suggest he will if you control it. One really good tip that I have for a lot of people is if you're not going to be able to go before the boss. Yeah, we know the boss speed is like
it's crazy, 350.
I mean, I think stage 1 starts at 250 or 260. Like, good lord. So you're going to go second. Now the boss starts with a lot of crit rate. And ideally, you want to bring like a decreased crit rate. So what you can do is use reaction gear, like your throwaway reaction gear, i.e. the reaction gear that's not very good for a faction, if you've got it, to basically mitigate the risk of that first attack from the boss being a critical hit. So your enfeeble target doesn't just get 1 shot. You can do that as well. I've used that on my Renegade, and it means that pretty much the boss doesn't crit on the first attack, which means I can keep her alive because she is quite squishy.
Yeah, 100%. So, all right, number 2 on your list. Who we got for this next champion that you liking?
I'm going to go with Renegade.
Okay.
I think she is a great option. She is the budget Kaimar option. If you've got Kaimar, you'll save yourself 10 seconds, right?
Yeah.
Because Kaimar resets fully, whereas both Gnut and a lot of max HP nukers tend to be like Royal Guard's a 4-turn cooldown, and Renegade only resets it by 2. But Renegade is an ideal slow and feeble target. You basically put her in the highest crit damage you can. It's a kind of a weird build. You'd basically go super high crit damage, 0 speed, and high defense, and 0 crit rate. Because you don't really want her to do damage because you don't want her to attack. You just want to basically make her the target. So she gets the first enfeeble, and then you will use her reset to reset your max HP nukers. So you almost kind of like set it up where you would go set up the nukers with reho, nuke, reset, set up the reho, nuke, and then hopefully the boss is dead. That's kind of the concept. It's not exactly perfect, but that's roughly the concept there.
Yeah, now she's a really good option because I've seen a lot of my viewers as well. They were asking, oh, is Renegade viable? Is it possible? I'd say it's definitely viable as long as you've got the right synergies around her to make it possible. But really good for players that don't have them. But
just disable the A3.
Yeah. Which one?
disable the A3 because that's a triple hitter, and you do not
Oh
want
yeah,
to.
but A2,
A1's
right? This
okay.
one. Yeah.
Yeah, the A2, sorry, not the A3, the A2. It's a triple hitter. The A3 is what you want to use first. It basically means she won't attack. If she's slow enough, she shouldn't attack before the boss is dead,
Hmm.
conceptually, if you set it up right. It kind of depends on having Gnut, though, to be fair. But I think for a lot of players, they're probably using Renegade in their dungeon teams anyway, right? It's not likely you're going to have a Kaimar, but there's more likely you'll have a Renegade because it's a rare void, which generally, if you've got an account of over a year, which is where, I mean, if you've got a younger account, you're probably not even bothering with the Shogun Grove to some extent, or you shouldn't
Yeah.
be putting too much effort in. I think most people will have a Renegade, and she's probably a very good option there.
Yeah, but moving into some for the Kaimar, like when I first came up with the strategies, it was trying to put Prince Kaimar, highest crit damage, definitely not an optimal build for players unless you've got multiples and no other like reasons to use them.
Yeah.
Well, you could actually just put the tank onto your cleanser, which is something that I done down the line. I kind of just jumped the gun and just put it on Kaimar. It just felt like an easier option because I want him to be slow. But for anybody that does want to have him faster, you still want to make him viable, you could simply just open up with an A1 and then lead into the reset afterwards so the rest of your champions can still take a turn. And that'll still be a strategy that I've tried out and it does work. So Prince Kaimar, probably one of the best options alongside Yumiko, who I'm actually a big fan of, but of course, being a Void Legendary, it's really hard to like get her for a starter. But if you do happen to get her, she can place that Hex and send some of those debuffs back, whether that be the drop defense, right? And by doing that, you don't need to actually bring in a drop defense champion like those Rihos, for example, or whoever that may be. And she just opens up a lot of opportunities alongside the resets as well. So, and also with the accuracy in all battles by 60, if you don't have a Gnut, can really help you reach those thresholds if you can't reach them.
Yeah. That's actually a good point. We didn't talk about Gnut's aura. Gnut has an 80 accuracy aura, which is even better. The thing about Yumiko's Hex is, of course, even though the boss is immune to Enfeeble, you can still send it back.
Yeah.
So you can still stop your initial Enfeeble target. So that kind of makes her a little bit more valuable in the sense that it gives you a bit of a chance to get rid of that Enfeeble. The only problem is it's only 50-50.
It's
so
too
if
much
you want
RNG,
consistent,
but what I tend to do is I bank on this, knowing that at least one of the drop defenses will get sent back because you've got so many champions that's actually that target. So if you're still running that team where you've got the cleansers, you still have that chance to send that drop defense. So your Gnut, for example, can just hit harder initially. So yeah, I like Yumiko, but for me personally, I still prefer Kaimar because of the turn meter fill, can just help you cycle in and shave a few seconds off.
Yeah, and he's also a full, right? So if you do happen to have some with like a 5-turn cooldown on your team, they'll get reset where Yumiko won't because she's only a 3-turn, I believe.
Yeah. So, all right, this next one, do you know what? I'm going to go to it for you because I know you're a big fan. We're just going to put it there, you're famous for this champion.
Queen of boss killing.
I was actually surprised because for anyone that's not aware, Saf loves this champion to a next caliber level, but the damage surprised me. So what does it all come down to for players that's interested?
So the thing about Whisper is all she needs is weaken. So when she has a weaken out on a target, she will ignore 100% of the target's defense. Makes her really good for high-end content where there's a lot of high defenses, right? I mean, it doesn't really work in Sand Devil beyond like stage 7 because the boss passive mitigates just raw damage. So you can't really it's not really ignoring defense anymore. It's ignoring the passive, which you can't really do.
Yeah.
What's really good about Whisper is she is an extra turn machine, a bit like Mr. Daithi. Her A3, as long as there's a decreased defense and weaken out, will guarantee you an extra turn. You can then go into the A2, which gives you increased attack and increased crit rate, which she places before she attacks, which means you can run her at 70% crit rate pretty comfortably. You also have a passive that if you can get past the block passive skills, you'll do 20% more damage to bosses. You also have a 10% chance on the passive to get an extra turn. You also can run her in Relentless because you've got that extra turn. So you can see where you go, and you basically go A3 for an extra turn into A2. You might get another extra turn into A1. You might get another extra turn. And she just hits really hard for a Void epic. If she just hits, like, she's one of the best boss killers in the game, for sure. And because the boss's HP is only around about, 4.4 million at the highest stage?
Yeah, I believe so,
early stages, she's going to outdamage some of the traditional, like, Cold Hearts and Royal Guards, and even Ninja, right? Because Ninja's based on max HP, so Ninja can only do 9% of the boss's HP in 1A2, plus his skill damage, whereas Whisper here can do 100% of whatever A2 is, and she does true damage. So She needs setup unless you want to try and RNG the A1. She can give herself weaken, but she can't give herself decreased defense. So you can kind of run like a Deacon Eater in Clan Boss for another example. You can run that kind of stuff as well. But yeah, that's what her A2 is, what makes her incredibly strong. A lot of people would say, oh, you faceless for not the Night Revenant's Faction Wars. Whisper for me is like so much better. She's also Void Affinity. So for Grove, that's brilliant for climbing because essentially any
the cat's going.
she's woke up. Any sort of stage you're trying to progress through, she's never ever going to weak hit, which means you're always going to be able to climb with her, right? She's not really a problem where you might be using Gnut and then you hit a bad affinity stage, so then Gnut can't be used because he's going to weak affinity. It's a problem with 25 actually. You can't use Gnut at 25 because he's weak affinity, so you're going to basically increase the counter, which is not good.
Yeah. All right then. So next up on my list is actually going to be a champion that I loved for Bommel. We now love him for this as well, and it's going to be Nishak Verminlord. And this actually came from a comment of mine, a big shout out to you, who said, oh, are you going to try and bomb this Shogun to death? And I actually thought, wait a second, let me try this out and see how actually valuable it is. And I wasn't sure like how much it was going to scale. Of course, Bommel has that amazing passive where we just get a crazy value for using bombs. But he really did surprise me, and he outperformed like my Cold Hearts and my Max HP champions over the course of a non-reset strategy. And it all comes down to one, extra turns. So if you've got blessings, because it's based off each skill that you're using, you could basically reduce the counters from two separate skills back to back. But he's placing those bombs, he's placing decreased attacks, so your enfeeble tank has a less chance of dying. And then you've also got bombs almost on every single skill as well, and the detonations and the protected poisons. So I'm a huge fan of Nishak for this one. Of course, maybe if you're going for a speed farm strategy, not going to be the best option. But if you're going for like a 1 minute farm, definitely very good to bring into the teams. I'm a big fan.
Should note though that the boss has a minus 90% poison debuff, so really we're looking at bombs for damage only here, not poisons. The boss, like it's a big bugbear of mine. I say it every single time. Like there's no in-game guidance that tells you that the boss is going to reduce poison damage by 90%. Our boss guide tells you that, but essentially any poison you deal to the Shogun, he will reduce it by 90%. And at 20 stacks or 10 stacks, I think he's a fully immune anyway. So poisons are not what we're using here. It's the extra turn to get the higher blessing with the bombs. Yeah, that's kind of where we're at here.
Yeah, 100%. And the decreased attack. We got another.
And the decreased attack. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
The Rat King. All right then. Number 3 on your list. 4. What we got?
We should probably talk about her. It is a Void Legendary. I can see the comments now saying, well, we all don't have a Riho Bone Spear, but she is.
Yes.
She is the quintessential champion for Shogun Grove. If you want to build a fast team, you're going to use Riho. It's even the case for Sand Devil. If you want a fast team in Sand Devil that isn't an Aniri ninja combo, it's normally based on Riho with someone like a Duchess or someone else to support the team, right? It's her A2. It's what makes her so good. The fact that she places every debuff you want.
In one
the most important debuff here that would never be recommended for any other area of the game really that much is decrease crit rate. Because the boss starts with incredibly high crit rate, you take 30% of that away. So it's not just the decreased defense and weaken that we're setting up, it's also the decreased crit rate. She also has a full cleanse. You kind of have this process where you open with the A2, and then when he spreads the enfeeble, you cleanse it all off and you fully heal everyone up. Like, she is pretty good for that. The only thing I will say is her passive doesn't work on as an enfeeble target because unlike Yumiko, she doesn't do it before the debuffs are placed. She does it after. So essentially, the debuff gets placed, it gets protected, and then she can't send it back because it's a protected debuff. So you can't use it for that kind of thing. But as a setting up the team, there isn't anyone better in the game. Just simply, there isn't anyone better in the game for it. Now, you've got Riho, you use her here.
I was saying it before, I was saying that she's actually, in my opinion anyway, the best champion in the game for the Shogun's Grove because all of the debuffs that we need, the cleansing and also the healing in that cleanse, which is very vital, like we spoke about with the Withered Crown earlier. She just brings such a simple but effective kit, and she was actually a guaranteed champion, so hopefully maybe a bunch of you guys got her, you don't have a value for her elsewhere, and you could definitely build her for this. She's going to be great.
She's actually an insane champion overall. I've seen a solo Spider, Sorath 120 hard.
Yeah.
Solo it. Because
really?
Yeah, because you get the HP burn, you get a lot of healing, you can't really kill her, she cleanses herself. I've seen her solo it. She's crazy in Clan Boss.
It's
You get every
crazy. I
debuff
think,
you
do
want.
you know what it is? Do you know when we're doing like videos or just amongst discussions of like what's the best champion in the game? We speak about like Acrisia's or the Chris. I just feel like she's very underrated in a sense. And
Yes.
like when you think about it, when you want these specific things, whether that be Clan Boss to decrease crit rate and drop the fence or the Sand Devils, she kind of just pops up in all of these endgame scenarios and just has that niche value. So
Yeah.
I think she's very underrated.
I think where she loses out a lot of power is the fact that her A2 is only single target.
Mm-hmm.
And that is a big problem.
Can you
Where
imagine
someone
that
like
as an
Cardiel,
AoE? Oh, God.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That's one of the weak
Yeah.
points is because that's only a single target. I think that's where a lot of the time she kind of gets lost in conversations because a lot of the problems can tend to be like wave control or wave content or stuff like that.
Yeah.
But when you actually go into single boss encounters like Sand Devil, like a lot of the Doom Tower bosses, she actually just brings like she nullifies a lot of the damage a boss can do because decreased crit rate will mean pretty much every boss in the game cannot crit.
Yeah.
And if they can't crit you, that's normally where you fail is when you get critically struck for a big amount of damage, not something else. So yeah, Riho Bone Spear, if you've got her, she will be in your Shogun team. I would be very confident in saying because she's just by far the best champion for this new dungeon.
Yeah, phenomenal. Now, this next one, guys, brace yourselves. Saf, we need to get the armor and, get some shields up. Because if you mention Ninja as a creator, it's a scary time, all right?
Don't talk to me. I'm not looking at it. Not what it starts with N and it ends with Inja.
All right, so Ninja, do you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna speak about him, all right? I actually showed him in a video and people were like, yo, don't use Ninja, how dare you? But
I did the same thing. I did a Sand Devil 25 team. It's like, oh, look, here's another team with Ninja. Even though in that video, I literally went through about 5 minutes of you don't have to use Ninja. It was still like the first thing I saw was, why are you using Ninja? Nobody has Ninja this. I'm like,
yeah,
there is a Chronom in the world, guys. Like, it's not quite the same, but he's pretty close.
There's definitely other options, but I would say for players that don't have a Gnut down the line, depending on when you're watching this, or you don't have multiple max HP champions, or whatever that may be, if you did get a Ninja back in the day, phenomenal champion. It all comes down to the instant burns of activations and the decreased defense and the resetting of the cooldowns of the A3. And that's basically what it all comes down to. But there is, of course, many other strategies. You don't have to use him. I'm just a big fan of him personally.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, he is, to some extent, the only champion in the game that does triple activation and triple placement. The placement is the most important thing about it. It's the fact that he replaces the burn with a 3-turn after he's done it. You do have multi-activators like Supreme Galek, you have Chronom, but they don't replace the burn, so they can often outrun their own burns. And I think that's what still makes him the most dominant champion for activations.
Do you think for players like, let's just say, Walking Tomb Dreng, right? They've got a Riho Bone Spear, they open up with it and just detonate with the Walking Tomb. Do you think that's still viable, or do you think it's a bit...
No.
You don't think it's going to be
a single
as powerful?
activation, so it's basically 3% damage. You might as well just
use a max HP.
Run a max HP nuker, or just like a damage dealer. The thing is, the reason why we use burns in Sand Devil is because of that passive, right? Pretty much all direct damage gets mitigated by 75% unless you've got lots of debuffs. So often we'll go to the burn strategy because we can bypass that strategy. In Hydra, more and more champions are becoming on hit, less burns. Got a Crisia now. We're going to have Gnut. People are using Turvolds. People are using Shamaels. I'm using Whisper. People are moving away from the max HPs a little bit because they're now more like just powerful. Not the max HPs, the burners, because they're just more powerful, like actual damage dealers. So you're not seeing the prevalence of you need HP burn anymore. And I think that's kind of the case. The only reason why Sand Devil stands out is because of that passive. But for here, the downside to something like an Artak, a Walking Tomb Dreng, is there's only one target and they activate once. It's not so bad in Ice Golem Hard because you've got 3 targets. So every time one target activates, the other target burns everyone. So HP burn, like Spider, is all about the volume of enemies on the map. The more enemies you have, the more effective HP burn is. But in terms of Walking Tomb Dreng, he'll help stabilize your team, but he's not going to be a very good damage dealer. And then you kind of like, you sit there and go, well, in his place, I could have brought Cold Heart or Royal Guard or another Gnut or a Crisia or a Husk, right?
Yeah.
A Septimus, an Armiga, all these champions that are likely going to out damage Walking Tomb Dreng. So I think the other thing to note as well is obviously Walking Tomb Dreng is a double hit A1. I really think it's a big risk to bring anything that isn't single hit champions. Yeah. Just my opinion. Unless you can guarantee you're not going to have Enfeeble. Like Cold Heart is basically a ticking time bomb if you don't control it because of her A1.
Or if
It's
you don't have
just
high star blessings, it's like it's risky.
even with high star blessings, because the weaken will happen, the enfeeble will override the blessing, right? So if you attack with an A1, you'll get 8 times 4. The blessing's only ever going to knock off like 6.
I guess
So
as long as you've got a cleanser before your cold heart ever goes under enfeeble, you should be good to go,
yeah,
right? Pretty
you have
much.
to almost be certain you're never going to get weak hit, never going to get enfeebled, because the moment you get one cold heart, it all falls apart. Like you literally cannot recover from an A1 cold heart. It's
Yeah.
brutal on those higher stages.
So
So
in terms of max HP champions, right? If you got your Gnut and you wanted to pair one other one for like a speed strategy, which is the one that you'd be looking towards the most on your account to
I
pair with
think the
it?
most not not on my account, but a Crizio in Stone Skin. But if I had it on my account, it's probably going to be Royal Guard
Okay.
or whatever the affinity matchup is for 24. I think it's 24 Spirit. So Royal Guard would be fine. I'm pretty sure
I
it's
think it's
Spirit.
Force. Force is 24. 25
Is
is
it
magic.
Force?
Yeah.
Okay, so then we would have to go towards a Husk or Septimus.
Husk or Septimus. Okay.
Probably a Septimus.
Interesting. That might give mine a use then, because I was
Yeah.
thinking of just staying with my cold hearts because of blessings. I don't have any on mine. This is the thing, guys. It's like you got to really look at your accounts. It's all down to the individuals. Like which max HP champions do you have the blessings on in order to make it effective for your accounts? But Septimus probably
They're also different as well, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, just to interrupt. Like Husk is really good in Hydra because you get a backup provoke. Right? That's the difference with Husk in versus that. And also Husk is AoE and Septimus is single target, but Septimus actually hits a lot harder on a single target because of his passive, where I think he deals 30% more damage to bosses. You also get a debuff extension chance in terms of the duration when he gets attacked. So in terms of a single boss, single target encounter, Septimus is way better than someone like a Husk or Royal Guard. Royal Guard is better if you need turn meter control, right? So you would use a Royal Guard on something like Dark Fade because you want the turn meter control. So each individual max HP nuker we've got, yes, we know Acrizia is probably the strongest max HP nuker in the game in terms of just overall utility, but each of them have their own kind of unique reasons for existence.
Yeah.
Like if you want just max HP, Armiga is one of the best ones in the game because he's got a 2-turn cooldown. So he's got it more available, where Septimus is a 4-turn, Royal Guard's a 4-turn, Husk I think is a 4-turn, I want to say. And Gnut, I think, is a 4-turn as well, right? So Armiga's great because you run him in reflex and you pretty much can have him like max HP in every single attack. You don't really care about turn meter control, you just do it. The only downside is multiply is a lot lower, so you have to build him a lot higher. But you put him in reflex, you'll just A2 constantly. I used my Armiga to kill a dragon boss on 25 for 6 months before Dragon 10 hard came out. He would basically kill Dragon 10, a Dragon 25 hard in 25 normal in like 40 seconds, maybe less.
Yeah, Armiga's a great option for sure.
Yeah, so I think in this boss, Septimus is probably the better option to go.
You see with sorry to cut you in there. So on the because you've got the block passive skills for someone like Acrizia and Septimus, so you don't get the optimal damage. Would you still consider him as probably one of the best, even without that?
Yeah, because he's got an attack multiplier.
Okay.
So the attack multiplier is better than the HP multiplier of Husk, and Royal Guard is probably a good option. But Royal Guard's A1 is not as good as Septimus's A1 in terms of damage, right?
Okay.
Septimus just hits a lot harder. I think Septimus also has like a higher base attack as well.
Yeah.
So you can just you can really pump some damage with your Septimus. You will see if you look at Sand Devil 25 and you look at the Shogun Grove, the max HP nuker people go towards if they are running a max HP nuke strategy in Sand Devil 25 is Septimus, because he just has a lot of damage.
I think I'm underestimating mine a lot. What it is, I pulled him so late into the game, and because I've got so many max HP nukers built on my account, it's like, oh, I don't need another one. But maybe I do for something like this. I might consider it.
Well, mainly because he's single target, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of people would have probably used their max HP nukers in something like in something like Hydra, where you kind of want AoE. The only reason why we know Gnut is so good in Hydra is because it's 10%, and then you can like pair it with Hex, so you basically get kind of like an AoE.
Yeah.
That's kind of like what we've been doing. So yeah, I mean, in terms of like my preferred choice alongside a Gnut, it's probably going to be Septimus or Armiga, and then Royal Guard or Husk. But what I would say is take a look at your refresh accessories.
Yeah.
Take a look at your reflex artifacts. I use Royal Guard in Hydra Nightmare because I have 3 refresh accessories for High Elves. So I get 15% chance to reset my max HP nuke.
That's huge as well. Yeah.
It's a big difference. So take a look at what gear you have in those factions as well, because that might change your decision on which max HP nuclear
And
you use.
also choosing which affinity you're going to be facing as well. Like if you're going for stage 24, make sure you're not building up a max HP champion that's weak hitting all the time. Like Gnut on stage 25 is basically a waste of time, right? You're going to be
Yeah,
triggering that shade
can't use
counter.
them.
So you got to be wary of the champions you're bringing in. What kind of squads are those? What kind of affinities? And then choose which floor you're going to be farming. Similar to Sand Devils. Like I use Ninja on stage 24 because it's the best one to do, right, for him.
Yeah.
But
the only difference on Sand Devil is you can use Ninja on stage 25 because
yeah.
weak hitting doesn't really matter. It just slows you down. We're here, weak hitting is your death,
Yeah.
right? Don't just, you can focus and narrow in so hard on going, oh, well, I need to make sure I'm feeble. Then you go, why am I increasing the shade counter? And it's like, oh, because I brought a weak affinity champion that is just naturally weaker hitting, right? You can overlook the base mechanics of the game when you're doing something as complicated as the Shogun Grove sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. So next one here, what we're going to speak about, Miss Mithrala Lifebane, a free to obtain champion from the Hydra boss, which I do entice all of you guys to go and get her. She's phenomenal. Where would you kind of sit her in terms of cleansers? Like for me, I think she's top 3 in the game for this boss. Where would you kind of rate her?
Yeah, I mean, she doesn't bring a heal.
Yep.
She brings a shield. So
Yep.
if you consider shielding effective HP and you scale her well, she's got a good base HP, so you need to build up her HP for the strength of the shield, and you also get strengthen as well. She's, one of the best cleansers in the game. She is actually one of the best champions in the game. You get everything you need. She like makes a team work.
Yeah.
Especially with the value of Hex these days. It's really good. She brings damage now with Hex, which she didn't do. Well, basically all she bought was poison before. But in terms of a cleanse capability for this particular boss, yeah, she's probably good. But what you got to keep in mind is if you're going to bring her, you probably need to bring either a regen set on your enfeeble target or something of that nature. You're going to need to basically make that enfeeble target have some sort of self-sustain because she is not going to heal. And you're not going to be able to have support for a cleanser, an enfeeble target, and a healer on top. You're going to have to like bring that healing role either into a regen set or some sort of like Wither the Crown, right? The either the enfeeble target has to be the healer, because she doesn't do enough healing here.
Yeah, like for me, one thing I actually did want to note as well, guys, is when you're looking for your cleansers, try and look for champions that actually have a 3-turn, not a 4-turn. Because it's one thing I noticed was I was using Rune Keeper Dazdirk, and unless you've got like Ruella, who I use with Rune Keeper to kind of boost so much turn meter to effectively make it a 3-turn because he's taking so many turns. You have to be very technical with speed tunes unless you've got a 3-turn. And why I like Mithrala is that shield protects your enfeeble target throughout the course of the A1s and the A2s or whatever that may be before the kind of whole phase resets again. And as long as you've got a champion like Wither the Crown, all those rehos to pair with Mithrala, then I think she becomes the best. But as you were pointing out, there's no healing mechanics, which you do need on that target. So
yeah, that's it. The 3-turn cooldown, because of the way the boss is spread, I think it's a 3-turn cooldown as well, or a 4-turn cooldown. Yeah. You're chasing the boss always because the boss is always going to go before you. So you need to almost have a cleanser that's like boss cooldown -1 because you're always going to be behind the sort of behind the race. That's why a 3-turn is really good. There is quite a lot of 3-turn cleansers out there. I think Pythian is a 3-turn
cleanser. Pythian's a phenomenal one. Like I was using him, and people underestimate this A1 heal as well. Like he's actually pretty substantial.
It does add up,
and it does heal as well.
And also every single debuff he cleanses is for the healing, right? It's an extra 5%. So if you've got, obviously you can't remove the debuffs on your enfeeble target, but everyone else with decreased defense and enfeeble, it'll heal him up. So not as desirable. I would say he's probably not the best option here, but he can do it. What he can do, of course, if you run him in bolster, is help mitigate that initial on hit because the bolster shield will give you a 5% damage reduction from his passive. So I think definitely the return cleanser Mithrala is up there.
Yeah, and basically with this one as well, it's the accuracy aura by 80. That's going to basically allow you to reach those thresholds like the Iron Twins Fortress where we have a big pain. It's going to make it so much easier on you. But
yeah. You need 605 at stage 25. You need a lot. So either champion with a lot of base accuracy, or you kind of want like that Gnut or Mithrala aura just so you get like 80 off. Obviously, you can get 80 from Affinity, but you can't get any area bonuses for Shogun because for some reason Playroom have decided that Iron Twin, Sand Devil, and Shogun Grove don't warrant an area bonus, which is where we need them. But there you go.
That is very odd. I've not really noticed that.
The areas where you need the stats, you don't have it. Because I'll be
Interesting.
honest, you don't really need it in Spider, you don't need it in Dragon, you don't need it in Ice Golem. The defense helps, I suppose. The Axie helps, but it's not really that much of a problem.
Mm.
Demon Lord, you don't need it. I've put some in mine. Hydra and Fire Knight is probably where you need the speed, but really where you need the Axie more than anything else are these new high-end dungeons, and they're not in the area bonus, which kind of devalues them a little bit. But there you go.
Yeah, for sure. So basically, last thing that I wanted to speak about was Taunt Champions. I know that we've got views on these as well. How effective do you think Taunt is in the game? Do you think that it's not as viable because of how less that we have? There's not enough versatility. What would you like to see from Taunt to make it actually effective for the Shogun's growth?
I think the only reliable one, I know people are probably using Dwerdan, but I think the only one that at high-end content that's going to be reliable enough is Green Warden Ruark.
Yep.
Because he does it for 2 turns and he's defense based. You can build him slow, and you also get some decreased attack and other things with him. He doesn't attack too many times. You can run the Dwerdan, but you can't extend Taunt buff. So he can't go Taunt into an extension. So he's going to outrun that really quickly unless you run him extremely slow. I think the Ambassador Lethalin is okay, but it's targeted. So on an auto run, how do you make sure you guide the targeting and you get all these different awkward things? Because it's not an AoE, it's single target. We all know in Clan Boss how much of a pain it is to like get things to target in the right place. You're going to have a similar problem here. So I think if you've got a Green Ward and Ruark, then the taunt strategy where you basically taunt away the debuff spread for the Enfeeble can be done. And I think it's one of the most popular teams at 25 at the moment that we're seeing. But I would definitely say for the majority of players, you're better off looking for that Mithrala 3-turn cleanse than you are trying to force a taunt.
Yeah.
Because effectively, Enfeeble is a taunt, right? The boss will only target Enfeeble. So if you make sure you can control the Enfeeble on a single target, you're technically taunting it anyway. So you know where it's going to go and attack. You just got to keep that target alive. The only reason why you'd want to taunt is to stop the debuff spread, but you could just replace that with a cleanse in a right speed turn, right? So he does his A2, and then right before anyone else takes a turn, you use like a Riho cleanse or a Mithrala cleanse, get rid of the Enfeeble, and you carry on as if nothing ever happened. So I just think Plarium have a habit when they release new debuffs and buffs into the game of taking a very long time to populate them with champions that actually are viable. When Decreased Resistance came out, we had Thresk for like 3 months, and I'm like, it's not even guaranteed to begin with, and the Infinity is a nightmare, so you just can't use them. It's only now that we're starting to get like Loriarka come in and a few more that we can go, okay, well, we've got Nari, we've got Loriarka, do we actually have viable champions? But even now, it's been a year since Decreased Resistance and Increased Resistance has come out, and really you've got Awela or Beauregard as Increased Resistance champions that I can think of. I know they did Wrath Matab, but he's not a very good champion. So it's just, they take a long time. So until we get, I would say, 5 to 6 taunt options, taunt isn't really a very reliable or useful buff for the majority of the player base. So instead of trying to like worry about going and find yourself a taunt, I would just build yourself a cleanser. That's my personal opinion.
I felt the same. Like I was really like deep diving, like forcing the taunt into the team when I was building comps, right? And I just felt like I'm very forcing it here. Like it doesn't need to be in the team. It's like, why am I doing this in a sense? Like put a Mithrala in there and you're sorted pretty much.
Yeah.
As long as, because you know where your tank's gonna go, it's gonna go on your highest crit damage, and you know as long as you can keep them alive, you don't really need to bring in this extra champion to.
Yeah, exactly. It's much easier to keep a champion alive than trying to force a team to work with one champion that's not quite good enough, right? I said Ruark's probably the only one because he's self-sustaining a little bit because he's defense-based and he can do it for 2 turns. So you need to run him really slow, so he's much more stable. But Dwerdan being 1 turn is a bit of a risk. Ambassador Lethalin being a targeted taunt means you probably have to run the leader as your taunt champion, which means maybe the aura's not right. Maybe you don't want Gnut to be the you see what I mean? It just becomes a very awkward scenario. So, I think it's interesting strategy. I don't think it's like completely irrelevant, but at the moment, I would say taunt is not something you should be concerned about too much. I would build the team around Gnut and make that work.
Yeah, 100%. Like if anyone that doesn't go for Gnut is gonna really regret it. He's a one of a kind champion. But so basically one thing I wanted to speak about as well before we sign off, and we're actually going to do some, I never told you, but we're going to be doing some extra legendary shards to wrap the video up. So hopefully we can get something.
Oh, are we? Yeah. You don't want me here. I'm cursed.
Oh, we're going to counter that today. But basically, Ruella really surprised me, right? Like I've never been like a crazy fan of her or anything like that. But when I was trying to look for replacements for Riho, which she definitely isn't, I thought this is phenomenal because she's placing decrease speed, drop defense, and weaken in the same skill, which is actually pretty hard to get from an epic, unless you want to use someone like Razin just for decrease defense and weaken or whatever that may be. But the thing that made her really cool as well is this part here, the time defensive. And I think it's very valuable having turn meter increase champions and crit rate as well. So because we need to crit on the boss, if you're landing like weak hits, it could be a bad time. But it kind of helps out your whole team, keeps you in a cycle if you can't reach those speed thresholds. So I dropped all of my speeds down to like, I think it was like 230, whereas before I was having like 260. And the speed tune worked completely fine. And I felt like that was very valuable for players. But
yeah, and she also got an Axie aura.
In dungeons,
which
yeah.
is great. So it's not really the best Axie aura, but it's helpful. I'm actually running her at the moment in my stage 19 team that I've reached with my current limit, because obviously Riho's low accuracy, because she gives the increased crit rate to Whisper once the debuffs cleanse happens, right? Because the boss will remove buffs from your team. So if you're running your Whisper at 70% crit rate like I am, you want her to be able to crit every single time. So she provides the replacement crit rate buff until Whisper gets back around to her A2. So she's actually, in my opinion, one of the best epics in the game. She's really good for Ice Golem, for Fire Knight. She's really good for Dark Fae. She's really good for any turn meter control scenarios, because the A1 is essentially a 30% swing, because you gain 15% and you take 15%. So it's essentially a 30% swing. And having decreased speed on this boss, because it's 350, is very, very valuable. So definitely, if you can get decreased speed on the boss, it will help you no end, as long as your speed team can handle it. So be careful with that.
Yeah, now she's really, even like I got her in Phantom Touch, so she just pops out crazy damage because so many multi hits, get 100% crit rate, you're good.
But, and especially if you've got High Awakening, like mine's 3 stars, so that helps keep the turn meter down, right?
Yeah.
Was
there any other champions here that you really wanted to talk about before we go into the shards and all that good stuff?
I think we've covered most of them, like the archetypal types, enemy max HPs, HP burn activators, ideally ninja. You know, you can go with a Chronum if you don't have ninja. He's a good substitute. Riho being the best. We talked about reset champions. And basically get your Gnut and start rocking away. What I will say about Shogun Grove just briefly is you will find you will farm it far less than you will farm Sand Devil, because there's far less you need to ascend. Really, you're only looking at that 7% crit damage on the amulet, and then probably the Axiom resistance on the banners. And then if you want to really win max, you're probably going to go and get those flat stat attacks. But essentially, instead of having 6 pieces you need to ascend, you've got 3. And of those 3, there's a lot less variance, right? When you look at the amulet, you can only really roll 1 of 4 substats. So you've got a 25% chance you're going to get the substat you want, versus like a chest, which can roll like 10 or 9 different substats. So you'll find you'll need less oil, so you'll farm it less. So don't necessarily think you need to then spend like thousands of energy here. You can probably get away with 3,000 to 4,000 energy farm. That'll cover pretty much all of the champions you need. Yeah, so 100%. that is one thing to note about the dungeon.
I'm just here trying to throw some. I'm being wary here because I need to throw some food into here to have some space for these shard pools. But how's your fusion going anyway? Are you on path and stuff, or?
Yeah. So today we've got the silly summon rush, which we're ignoring. Artifact enhancement is the one that scares me the most. Like my accounts have no silver, so I got to go farm some silver. Champion training on the free to play needs to be done today. I'm waiting until the next Dungeon Divers before I carry on with Ice Golem. We're waiting for the Dungeon Divers 3 because we'll do Dungeon Divers 3 with Ice Golem, Leftover, and Fire Knight. So yeah, I mean, I'm on course for both of them. The only thing I've got risk at the moment is Artifact Enhancement and then the Champion Chase. But if players aren't sensible or don't know, you can obviously get 3 Ambassador Lethelins in 1 Champion Chase window, because you'll be able to fuse them on Friday to basically get yourself 750 free points. So that's what I'm going to be doing on both accounts to basically cut Champion Chase down. We reckon it's probably going to be somewhere between 2,000 to 2,500 points. But my free-to-play doesn't have a clan boss team, so I'm doing it with like really scuffed scenarios. I think I've managed to make it somewhat of a chess nightmare team now, but my plans for Ultra Nightmare didn't go so well.
Yeah, well, those shard pools didn't go too well. We did get a deathless, and then we got another deathless from this useless mortal soul.
Are you doing the souls? I didn't even notice you were pulling them. I told you not to.
Oh,
Are you pulling shards?
Yeah, I got nothing. Nothing crazy. I was hoping to get like a Lethelin or something. Do you know what? I'm going to do this one void, right? We're going to get that werewolf dude. I'm actually a big fan of him.
Werewolf.
Oh, we never got him. So good. But yeah, Saf,
I will kid you not, the amount of torment that I've had all week pulling mysteries and shards, praying that I get one of these rares come out that for the fusion, so I don't have to do the artifact enhancement, has been brutal, because obviously I can't really use shards on the free to play. So I used about 450 mysteries to get the summon rush done, and every time there was a blue that came out, I was like, is it going to be the rehab? Can I save myself an event? But unfortunately, I didn't get lucky. I did pull like 30 ancients, I think, today, but I'm not really. I got like the tier 1 soul stone. I'm not really going to push any further for it, to be honest, because I'd rather keep my ancient shards for a guaranteed in the future. So 1+1 on ancients are just that, basically.
Yeah. All right. On that note, Saf, appreciate you coming out. It's been a long collab. I'd say quite overdue. We've not really. Have we done a collab since I joined HH?
I think Ganishak was the last thing we did when we did the Bommel team.
Oh yeah, we did. But I think we haven't
Back in
had
the
you
day.
on this side of the pond.
No,
when
we
you
haven't.
did. So
That's true.
it's been nice to have you here. Hopefully we could do many more in the future as well. And guys, I'll leave the HH Gaming YouTube channel in the description below. Make sure you guys go and drop a sub. And you know, everybody that enjoyed it, make sure you head over there. And if you guys did enjoy today's video, be sure to hit that like, subscribe button. Let us know which champions you'll be using for the Shogun's growth. And we'll catch you guys in a video soon. Peace.